Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are now at the point in our course where we are getting into real interactions, real meaning. This is the cellular health coaching part. The first part of this session, however, as I promised, I will be talking a little bit about the principles of community, or the principles of systems. And as we are called the Cellular Health Coaching Organization, we'll be looking at the cells, and they form beautiful systems inside our body which are coordinated, and they're competing and also cooperative systems and all sorts of things that are built into our own body so that we are able to then carry on the processes of life. And it's pretty cool. Then today we're going to be talking about communication or signaling. All right, I'll start it out a little bit with you. I mean, what exactly is signaling? I have a question for you. Do you send signals to your car? You send signals to your car? Well, there are all sorts of sensors in the car. When you sit down on the seat, it signals to the car that you're sitting there. When you put the key into the ignition, that's another signal. You might hear a little ding, ding, ding. And that means it's received the signal and it's sending you a signal that you put the key in. So yeah, you're receiving communications from your car. And you turn the engine on, and then you have some pedals down there, the gas pedal and the brake pedal. What do those things do? They put signals into the engine. The gas pedal opens up a valve that lets the air and gas into the car. If you push that, it opens up. The car, of course, the engine accelerates. It goes faster. And if you push the brake, what happens? You stop the process. You stop the process of the wheels moving around. You have something that will close in and clamp the wheels so that they will not be able to move as freely. And so you're sending signals to your car. Your car then is able to function and do what you want it to do because you send it signals. And very much the way that you send signals then to your car, that you're connected to your car, that very much that same way, all of the machinery and the cells that are inside your body are sending signals one to another as to what they should do. And so, you can think of a lot of examples. Have you sent signals to your house? Said, well, okay, if I turn a light switch on, if I flush the loo or the toilet, and if I then turn on the stove or whatever, that's sending signals to the parts of my house. And the house then is responding by doing what it's programmed to do. And so that's that's a really simple thing. Well, how about have you send signals to each other? Now, this is where it gets really interesting, to other people. How many people have you communicated with today? And then are you sending signals to nature, to the environment, to the air, to everything? The light that's coming from our environment is entering our eyes and sending signals to us as to what actually is out there, so that we can assess using this beautiful machinery in our brain, and we can assess what we believe to be real outside of our own bodies. Also, the noise or the vibrations of air are coming into us. So there are so many forms of signals that we are receiving from everything else. Today, we're going to be talking about our connectivity and how that relates to the systems that exist within our body. And with cell signaling, we're also going to be talking about the most fundamental of all of these cell signaling processes, which is redox signaling. And you get to hear a little bit about that from me, because that is an area of interest to me, of great interest, and I've spent many, many years studying it. So the next week we'll be talking about homeostasis, or balance, and then we'll go on talking about some of these other principles that relate to community. Well, now let's talk then a little bit about our cells, our cellular communities. Up to this point, we've been talking mostly about, well, what our cells need in order to exist and to thrive as an individual cell. So an individual cell needs oxygen. We need to breathe. But bringing the oxygen to the individual cells requires an orchestration of incredible processes between cells that bring air into our lungs and absorb the oxygen into our blood. Those types of things are community oriented. The nutrients, okay, the micronutrients, the nutrients, we learned there are only about 40 types of nutrients and minerals that our body can use inside of our cells. Well, those are brought to us also by our community, what we eat, what we bring into our bodies, and what grows in the plant life outside of our bodies, the nutrients. The water is very, very interesting signaling messenger. We're going to be talking about that in depth in just a little while. Water, of course, fills our cells, and all of the electrochemical as well as the biochemical reactions that take place in all of life throughout all the earth take place in water. So just can't get out of it. I used to joke. You say, well, if you want to study biology and molecular biology, you're going to get wet. You've got to study water. And then the signals, of course, from all the rest of the cells, all 70 trillion cells in your body, are coming in. And then your body, of course, is producing, or your cells are producing their own signals, which help coordinate them with all of these cells which are around us. So if we're looking at our cells, then now not as individual cells, but as a collective of cells that are working together, then we start to realize, how important this signaling aspect is. And so to make it really clear and understandable, to anyone that has ever been inside of a house or an apartment, we talked about, well, we send signals to our house, right? We send signals to our cars, we send signals to these things, but we have certain machines or devices in there, such as our fireplace, our stoves, our heaters, our mailboxes, and our appliances and such. Inside of our cells are very similar types of structures. We'll be talking a little bit about some of the structures that are inside of our body, our cells, individual cell. But so the analogy or the similarities between a cell and a house are several. Cells shelter the activities of life that take place inside them, allow them to happen in a closed environment. The house also shelters the activities of life inside of it, and then has all of the devices and things necessary to sustain life. And those are the things that are actually very similar to this. But of course, our houses and our cells do not. Here's some of the analogies. The mitochondria produces energy in our cells. It's very similar to the fireplace inside of our house, or the furnace that produces energy. It also burns oxygen. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. So we have these individual cells, and these cells have different signaling mechanisms. Now, Inside of our house, how do we receive signals? Well, we might have one of these, like cell phones. There used to be, line or hard lines, and we'd be able to pick up a phone in our house and then call other houses. Well, our cells also have very similar types of things. They also have mailboxes, and our cells receive mail. And the mail that our cells receive, I can name a few of them. And there's mailboxes to receive insulin. There's mailboxes to receive sugar or glucose. There's mailboxes to receive many of the other hormones. And there are individual types of mailboxes that are built into the outside of our cell that allow only the signals that are allowed to enter the cell to pass. And these are mailboxes. And then I was going to mention that our cell can also defend itself from any threats on the outside. It uses antioxidants to defend itself against oxidation. We'll be talking about that in depth again in a little bit. But it also sends signals using what I call a cell phone. And the cell phone then uses signaling molecules that are both electrical and physical in nature to send signals to other cells, to talk to your immune system, to communicate the status of the cell with other cells, and send in emergency information if the cell needs help, defense information if the cell is attacked. So the cell then is able to communicate and send signals to its outside environment, as well as process those signals inside. So let's look at our house analogy a little bit. Our antioxidants, our mailboxes, and our cell phones are all part of a large network of signaling systems inside of our body, inside of our cell, rather, that tells the cell what to do. It turns on the genes, sort of like the light switches inside of our house, It turns on other mechanisms, and we'll go and talk about that. So redox signaling and other signaling mechanisms are mediated then through types of external media and internal media inside the cells. Mailboxes are usually receive hormones and nutrients, and then the cell signaling devices use electrical devices. Their cells actually pass electricity between them, and this is pretty obvious. As most people know, when you move a muscle, most of those signals are electrical signals and are passing back and forth, both electricity, which is basically electrons. Electrons are moving back and forth between the cells to send signals to them. One of the kings of the cell signaling messengers is actually the neurons, or the nerve cells. So let's see, I might have a picture of a nerve cell, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. But these nerve cells then have both they have mailboxes between them, and they have electrical connections that send the signal along, and then send mailboxes out to the next cell over, and the mail is received, and then the signal is passed. Well, if a neuron does not want to send a signal to its neighbor, it can take away all the mailboxes, and then it can't receive a signal. But if it wants to be extra sensitive, it can put in a lot of mailboxes, and then the signals are passed very readily. So the pathways between neurons, which neuron is to receive which signal, is mediated by how many mailboxes are on the outside of these neurons in the axioms, and the what they call. Okay, I'll get into that in just in a minute, but I wanted to express that houses in our communities and the way that they work are very similar to the way our cells work. Our cells then are organized and structured in communities, very much the way that we are organized and structured in our communities. The cells need supplies, as we do, and these supplies are brought to us through the blood. In our communities of houses, of course, the supplies are brought to the houses by streets. And then also, as signals are sent between us and other houses, there are also other types of ways to connect these houses together in our communities. And we've mentioned a few of these. And the signals that are sent between these communities of cells are very important for repair and replacement mechanisms of our cells. Say, for example, we have a bacterial infection or something like that, or toxins, or a cut, or physical damage, or whatever would happen to damage our cells. Well, the cells start to build up these signals called oxidants or reactive oxygen species. And that's like the first line of signaling that the cells do. They start to build up oxidants. You often can see this because blood will open up into this area. It'll become red. It will become swollen. Inflammation starts also in these areas where there's high levels of oxidation or oxidants. So the oxidants themselves are a measure or a way that the cell can signal that there's something wrong. So when something is wrong inside of a cell and it starts to signal that, it can signal in the immune system. Those signals get to the immune system along with others. And there's all sorts of regulatory things along the way too. And the cells regulate themselves very carefully, just the way you regulate the gas in your car and the brake on your car. The cells have to regulate how much energy is going into an area, how much blood is going into an area, how many supplies are going into an area. It regulates how fast the immune system responds to these types of signals. All sorts of things that are regulated very carefully all the time inside your cells. I mean, they're fascinating little devices. For example, the fuel to the cells are regulated by kinases, which are actually little things that close off the fuel lines or the ATP lines, which kind of slow the cell down, slow the metabolism down, or open it up and speed the cell up. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of these things, but it's just a very, very fascinating little mechanisms inside your cell. And of course, they're all coordinated by the signals that are sent to them. Now, reactive oxygen species is also used to kill the bacteria. It's antimicrobial, and it'll kill the bacteria and almost anything, parasites. It has to kill everything, actually. So these reactive oxygen species are what we will see are also part of the redox signaling molecule species, are those which are also used to kill the bacteria in your body. They're antimicrobial. And they help activate the antioxidants too, make them stronger. make the shields much stronger and inside of your cells. And when these are all gone, the cells have two things that they can do. They can either repair themselves or they can kill themselves. And if the damaged cells kill themselves, that's okay, because then normal healthy cells can then take their place. It's kind of interesting. That one's offset a little bit. Dysplasia. Anyway, that's the way that the cells are then able to form perfect communities again by using their signaling mechanisms and heal themselves. So we're looking at also the signaling mechanisms that surround healing. Okay, so in our communities, these signals are sent through telephone lines. Materials and supplies also come in through water lines. And then waste is taken away through sewage lines. And in our cells, we also have these different types of mechanisms. This is a lymphatic vessel. Lymphatic blood, our vessels carry the waste away. They're like the sewage. They're like the sewage lines of the body. These are blood vessels which carry the supplies to our house, as the water and everything else. But you might notice these little red lines in the blood vessels. These are redox signaling channels that carry messages, chemical and electrical messages, then to the cells as to their state, whether they're healthy or not healthy. And these messages then are carried through these little redox signaling wiring. You might want to think of it inside all of our blood vessels. It's a fascinating thing. I'm going to explain a little bit what redox is in a minute, but just to give you an idea, the tissues in our bodies communicate very much like our communities do, and the similarities are so striking. I mean, look at the houses along a street as you'd see on Google Maps. You know, there's the houses sustaining life, and we have some 7 billion people on Earth, and they mostly all have houses. And here in our body, here are some of the brain cells. You can't see them too well, but they're the kind of blue and green cells that are here. And then the blood vessels that are connecting them look very much like our communities. And then 70 trillion cells in our body rather than 7 billion. 70 trillion. That means, like, for every house we have on Earth, we would have 10,000 houses, cells. So these cellular communities are absolutely fascinating, remarkable. Here's another one. Here's skin cells on the right. And then here's another picture of Google Maps. We see that the types of communities that cells form and the communication channels, these are little neuronic tissue here, or neurons, or electrical connections that connect then these communities of cells. And so wanted to explain this a little bit. Now I want to explain a bit about what is redox. I've been mentioning several times reduction oxidation and the type of signaling that takes place inside of our cells, cell communities that help them to maintain order. Well, this is the way that order is maintained. Here on the right is a community of cells. On the green are the redox signaling channels. You can see these molecules that are being passed and created and passed between cells, individual cells, both inside the cells. These are nucleuses. The nucleuses then are surrounded by your membranes. These are the houses, if you will. Each one represents a house, and they're passing messages. Well, this is controlled oxidation. Controlled oxidation is very much like the fireplace in our house. Everything is controlled. All of the energy is being produced in a nice controlled manner, and there's no problems. The only problems come when we get uncontrolled oxidation, when the energy is being produced, that's being produced is way in excess, and then we see these smoke signals coming out. So these smoke signals then represent a problem. So if you look at the picture of the cell communities down here, you can tell which cells have a problem. This one's on fire. These are on fire. Each one of the ones then are giving us signals, both to the immune system and not. By the way, in this picture down here, the nuclei are red. Up here, they're just black. So it's sort of the same picture, but a little bit different color. But you can see very clearly where the oxidation is taking place inside of our cells, and that's sending distress signals to the rest of the cells. And then, as we would in our community, this sends signals to the emergency networks that deal with such things like our immune system, and as we've seen before. So now I just wanted to let you see basically how this signaling system works. And since it's one of the most fundamental signaling systems in all of nature, I'm going to get a little bit technical. I'm an atomic physicist, so if you want to sleep through the next section, go ahead. If not, then I'll try to make it as simple as I can for you. When we talk about oxidation, we're talking about a characteristic of oxygen. Oops. This is an oxygen atom. This is what we atomic physicists consider atoms. And these little puffs over here are the electrons, and they live on the outside of the atoms, along with these little sphere of things. It's not like you would see or you'd think they have little electrons flying around the atoms in orbits. The orbits are actually little fuzzy balls. This is quantum physics that we're talking about now. And then there are two electrons that are not paired. These unpaired electrons are called free radicals. And the unpaired electrons are hungry because they want to have a partner. So an oxygen is very hungry for electrons. And this quality or this characteristic of oxygen makes it scoop up electrons or steal electrons very quickly. The process of pulling an electron from another atom is called oxidation. And so oxygen oxidizes or pulls or steals electrons from other and so what will happen also, thank you, is that these oxygens will pair up because they'll steal electrons from each other, or they'll pull electrons from each other and form an oxygen molecule, or O2. In this diagram here, these little dots here are the electrons on the outer part of the molecule. These are the unpaired ones here, and these ones are paired in the middle. The two here are paired. Okay. So if I were to look at this, then the oxygen molecule sitting here in the center also attracts hydrogen, and if it attracts two hydrogens and bonds with the hydrogens using its electrons, these oxygen can be thought of as little sticky things, especially where the electrons are sitting out there. They're very sticky. And so the oxygen will pull in some hydrogen, and that becomes H2O, which is water. And this H2O, this is what a water molecule looks like, really, if you were to magnify it. You have these little things sticking out, these fuzzy balls with electrons in them. And then the hydrogens are a little bit round. There's 1 trillion billion of these molecules in just one drop of water. So you think, holy cow, you know, that's a lot of them. Another thing too is that since the oxygen loves electrons so much, it pulls all of the electrons in and pulls them away also from the hydrogen. So one part of this water molecule becomes negatively charged, and the part with the hydrogen on the other side becomes positively charged. So this thing becomes a little charged molecule. We'll talk about that a little bit when we're asking the question, how can signals be passed inside of our cells? Because every signal has to pass through water, these water molecules. And so as these water molecules, then as we noticed, you guys know, you know, what charge means, electrical charge. It's like what's on a balloon. If you've taken your finger and after you've rubbed it across the carpet, you'll notice that you're charged. And if you touch something, you might get a shock or a spark as the electrons move. Well, you're becoming negatively charged. If you then get close to a little stream of water going from your tap, let's say you just turn the tap barely on so the stream of water is streaming down but not dripping. If you put your finger next to that stream of water, it'll actually bend the stream of water next to your finger. I was hoping to get a picture of this, but many of you have seen it. And that's because the electrical charge that's on your body actually is enough to turn these little water molecules. So one way a water molecule can send a message is it can flip around. It flips around to follow the electric fields that's in your water, in your cells, or anywhere actually, inside or outside your cells. So if I have a positive charge, like a sodium atom in here that is positively charged, all of these water molecules will kind of cluster around it with their negative sides facing toward, the positive charge. If it's a negative charge, then it'll flip these little things around. So you can actually flip these little water molecules just by bringing in an electric charge to them. And that's one way that you can send a message. The message is actually sent by flipping a bunch of these water molecules as they go along. They're all moving around very quickly and bumping against each other. But they will form little clusters. And these water clusters are part of the signaling mechanisms of the cell. So the first redox signaling messenger that we're going to talk about is called water. You can signal through means of water. Now, you can send signals through water by flipping the water molecules around. You can also start taking the water molecule apart. When you take the water molecule apart and then build it into other structures, along with salt, which is sodium chloride inside the blood, then you can form little structures like this. Well, you can put two of the oxygens together, and then the hydrogens can be sitting out there, and you get something called hydrogen peroxide. And that is another one of these signaling molecules. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. Oxygen itself, the two oxygens stuck together, is a gas. That's the oxygen that's outside and that we breathe. And that oxygen there, molecule is also a signaling molecule. So water itself is signaling, oxygen is signaling, superoxides, which is another configuration, and hypochlorites, another configuration of these oxygens and the water and the sodium chloride. They are very reactive oxygen species, and they tend to signal. And the way that they signal is they reduce and they oxidize. Well, reduction we didn't talk about very much. We didn't talk about that. The reduction happens when a molecule receives an electron. Remember, the oxygen loves to steal it. So when the oxygen steals the electron, the oxygen becomes reduced, and whatever it stole it from becomes oxidized. So the oxygen oxidizes other molecules by stealing them, but it itself becomes reduced, and that's just the nomenclature, the name of what we gave it, of reduction and oxidation. And so reduction oxidation takes place at the same time. And these very reactive oxygen species know very well how to reduce and oxidize everything that's around them in their environment. And if they're in perfect balance, as they are inside of our bodies, they can send messages, and they can conduct messages, and they can let messages pass. And so that's how you can use water and salt to send messages inside your body, and it's something that has been done ever since oxygen became available to life. So anyway, that's pretty interesting. Now I'm being a little bit more technical. I promised I would. Oxygen, or two oxygens stuck together, the molecules have these free radicals in them and the bond. And if they receive another electron, they become a superoxide anion. So now we've stuck another electron to it. The oxygen has become reduced, and it's oxidized something else out there that's not shown. Peroxide, like hydrogen peroxide, has stolen 2 electrons. And then hydroxyl and free radicals and such can steal more than 2 electrons each, until you get to very, very highly reactive oxygen species, which are very dangerous also. So the most reduced form of oxygen, by the way, is found back here in water. This is the most reduced form of oxygen. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how this plays inside then a living organism. Because we're talking about trillions of cells. They have to coordinate themselves, and these are the tools that they have. They have water, and then they have these reactive oxygen species, and they have antioxidants and some other things. And I'm not going to get too much into detail, but here's some of the other reactive oxygen species that we have in our body. So let me really quickly go through this. I don't want to become too technical. But inside plants, light comes down and it takes water and it splits it. It splits it into these superoxides and these hydrogen peroxides and oxygen. So oxygen gas is given off into the atmosphere. So light comes in, and through photosynthesis, it turns these water into oxygen and other reactive oxygen species that are used as messengers. And then with this energy, this NADPH, it gives off the carbohydrates and fats that are used as energy for all the rest of life. Now, inside of, okay, these symbols are a little bit out of sync here. Inside of animals, then, the carbs and fats are ingested from the plants. And then with energy here, and the oxygen, it goes through the reverse type of reaction. It takes the oxygen, turns it into superoxides. That's what that Superman there is there for. Hydrogen peroxide, and then creates energy. So plants use energy, turn it into carbs and fats. Carbs and fats go into us, and then it's turned back into energy and water, H2O, and then this cycle is complete. Water, of course, goes back into the plants, produces energy, etc. As long as we have light from the sun, then all animal life and plant life is able to then do this reaction. But what I wanted to point out to you here is that these components, the circles are a little bit off, but these ones over here, hydrogen peroxide and superoxides, are the reactive oxygen species or redox signaling molecules that are part of photosynthesis and of mitochondrial metabolism inside of our bodies. And these little oxidants, they have the ability to go inside of our cells and change the form and shape of proteins, which are the little machinery inside of us. So it allows the machinery to change shape and form. And that's the way the machinery works, along with ATP, which is also the energy that is passed to the machinery. And then big molecules that are represented here by these structures are able to turn that back into the way it was before. They're oxidized again, and they switch back, and they're reduced, they switch. So these causes conformational changes in these molecules and makes life actually work inside of us. So now we can't say that these oxidants are bad. Things like hydrogen peroxide and oxidation, they're very, very important. They send signals all over the place. So for example, when we have in a plant, when we have a bacteria or a pathogen that starts attacking the plant cell, what will happen is that certain signals will be passed and create reactive oxygen species, which are these redox signaling molecules. And then the redox signaling molecules will go out here, strengthen the cell wall, signal to other areas, and make it possible for the plant cell to defend itself against the pathogen. And these are all redox signaling systems inside of a plant. So you always wondered how plants defend themselves, or the immune system of a plant. It's all mediated through redox signaling. And so these are very important. Now I'm going to get a little bit technical here. We talked a little bit about how plants create energy through our carbohydrates, through this process. Well, light comes in. I won't explain this, but what it does is it creates this reactive oxygen species like hydrogen peroxide that slows down photosynthesis. So when the sun is full out, your plants create hydrogen peroxide, and it slows down the energy production so they don't burn out. Sounds like, what you do when you are pressing on the gas of your accelerator in the car. You press on the gas too much, you hear your engine roar, and that gives you a signal that maybe you better let off the gas a little bit. And those signals are mediated by hydrogen peroxide. So hydrogen peroxide actually is letting up on the gas, tells these signals let up on the gas. Inside animals, these things represent the mitochondrial metabolism. Hydrogen peroxide also goes out and slows down our metabolism. So it's also the gas pedal for our metabolism. And so these type of reactive oxygen species now, instead of being enemies to us that need to be eliminated from our bodies, now start to become one of the most important messengers that regulate and orchestrate all of the processes of life, right from the metabolism of energy, right down to how we react to damage and cellular problems. So inside our mitochondria, this H2O2, the hydrogen peroxide, the superoxides, and all of these that you may or may not be familiar with right now, but they're the redox signaling molecules, interact so very intimately with almost every process that is happening inside of our cells. We need these signaling molecules. They are essential. And as the mitochondria produces them in almost perfect balance, in actually using this very diagram, this process that's in this diagram, as we produce these signaling molecules inside of our mitochondria, and there's about 200 mitochondria inside all of our 70 trillion cells. You can imagine how excited then scientists are getting when they are understanding these redox processes inside of cells, these redox signaling processes. So the field of redox signaling is now exploding, and it's formed a whole field of biology, I would say a field or a subfield of biology that is now being written about and studied. Now thousands of articles are being written every year about these processes inside the cells. And it all has to be about how the mitochondria inside our cells produce these reactive oxygen species or redox messengers, and then how the antioxidants then eliminate them, and the balance or homeostatic balance that they play inside of our cells. Remember, the mitochondria are like the fireplaces of our cells. They're producing the energy, but they're also producing what I call smoke signals. And these smoke signals then are the things that let the body know that when we have a damaged cell, it needs to do something to fix itself. Without these redox signaling molecules, the damaged cell will not be able to signal repair or replacement. It'll just become more and more damaged. And that can be very terrible, because a damaged cell, if it does not fix itself, will divide into 2 damaged cells, 4 damaged cells, etc., and cause us to age or cause other problems when our cells are not able to repair themselves correctly. And so the propagation of damage happens when redox signaling is not working inside of our cells. And the repair and replacement of damaged cells happens when redox signaling is working inside our cells, and we start to realize, how these communities of cells work together to keep themselves repaired, replaced. And just imagine, houses along a street. You don't want to live in a slum neighborhood. You don't want to live where there's partially repaired and smoking buildings. What you want to do is you want to have in the smoking buildings, there are signals that we need to get busy. That's what redox signaling does. It gets everything busy to repair the slum neighborhoods and to replace the cells that are too damaged, just as you would in our communities, to create then a working community of cells again in our body. Now this happens, I believe I showed you here, because these redox signaling molecules are produced by the mitochondria and eliminated by the antioxidants. But they also help produce more antioxidants and increase the power of the antioxidants. So now, if you didn't understand all of that chemistry and biology, if you didn't really follow, what exactly hydrogen peroxide and all that was, think of this. All of those things are like smoke signals that allow the body's own cells to recognize and repair themselves. So when the smoke signals happen, like we've seen before, oxidation in our cells increases. This calls in the immune system. The immune system uses the same oxidants to kill the bacteria. These redox signaling molecules are antimicrobial. Normal then cellular regeneration regenerates the tissue, and you have perfectly beautiful new neighborhoods of cells that are working together as they should. I'm not going to go deeply into this, but also the regulation of insulin inside of your body, inside of your pancreas, is mediated by hydrogen peroxide. And if there's too much oxidation, it can create the conditions that lead to diabetes. So now we're going to go into what happens if this signaling process is not working inside of our cells. By the way, these are studies. I'm not going to go into them very deeply, but so if some of you are interested, I'll provide them in the supplemental materials of how the redox signaling molecules mediate the processes of what they call the citric cycle, or the cycle that produces energy inside the mitochondria. I'm not going to get too far into this, but what we have found is that these simple oxidants and that are made from water, which is one of them, and salt is another. They mediate DNA repair, antioxidant regeneration, oxidative stress, cell division, tissue regeneration, blood flow regulation, inflammation, and microbial defense and immune system, response, protective enzymes, cellular death when the cell is too damaged and should be killed, messaging of vascular regeneration, and so much more. So we're starting to learn that this redox signaling messaging system, along with the other chemical messengers, and we haven't even mentioned that, sugars are messengers. Sugar is a messenger in our body. It has its special receptor. If there's too much sugar, it causes us to produce insulin to burn the sugar more readily or turn it into fat. And so foods can be messengers. The concentration of almost anything in our blood, if it gets too high, is a messenger that tells the body it needs to regulate and repair itself. So all of these cells then are talking to each other. They're forming a community. They're signaling each other. They're doing so that they can function as a community of cells. They share resources. They are able to send signals when there are problems. They are able to send signals to emergency response cells like the immune system and such. Now, it's very important to understand these sort of things. Now I wanted to go and take a step back. And I've been at this now for a little bit more time than I wanted to. But it's too sorry, I get too excited about this stuff. When you start realizing the science and the possibilities that you have for benefits people and the redox signaling, it's just incredible. You're able to mediate cell repair and healing and things like that. Wow. So anyway, this is a very exciting thing. Now, if we don't take advantage of some of these technologies, I think that we are going to be in serious trouble in the coming years. We're starting to see that diabetes is increasing. on Earth in a surprising way. One of the things that I've been looking at is something called ASD syndrome, autistic spectral disorders. Now, the ASD or autism is increasing incredibly in our communities. Oops, sorry about that. And here's some data from the CDC. The light blue line is actual data, and it's following very closely an exponential increase. In fact, in 2020, right now, we are almost exactly at 25 people per 1,000 that have been diagnosed for autism or autism spectral disorder. So it's following very, very closely this exponential curve. This is very troubling, because if we follow this out, then just a few years, 1 in 10 of our children may be autistic in just a matter of 10 to 20 years. And so, you know,
Gary, before you go any further,
yeah.
I have this in the chat. Could you back up one slide for just a moment?
Okay.
That should do it. I imagine they took a shot of it.
Okay, great. So autism, believe it or not, is not a genetic effect. It's growing much too fast to be a genetic effect. It's an oxidative problem. Here's some of the statistics. You know, in the year 2020, 1 out of 40, it's actually 1 out of 38, actually, will be autistic. In 2050, then maybe 1 out of 5 or 6 people will be diagnosed as being autistic if this trend keeps on going. And it's very discouraging until you look at the mothers of autistic children that are just rallying around the globe to find a solution for this problem. And they're looking for answers for their children. It's a very touching thing. It happens, autism happens when neuroinflammation becomes rampant. It's an oxidative process that causes our brain to swell within us. It can be caused also by toxins. You can simulate autism by putting toxins in your brain that will swell the brain. Just as, you know, as alcohol, by the way, will cause the brain to misfunction. You know, you wouldn't want to be drunk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'd be called brain damaged. So it's causing the brain to swell and to misfunction, and it can't be worked. Now we have several oxidative therapies that can be used: ozone therapy, photonic therapy, hydrogen peroxide, hyperbaric oxygen, and many of these have been shown to be effective. Also, these redox complexes that I was talking about can be directly utilized in some cases to help cellular processes to clean up the damage, reduce the inflammation. So you know, this is a remarkable thing. Again, oxidative processes or signaling is the king of signaling, also in our nervous system, in our blood vessels. Remember when we saw those little red lines streaking through the blood vessels that are the channels that redox signals go through our blood vessels and are in every part of our body. So this just to let you know, this is the signaling process. That's so very fundamental, but I hope you understand also how important it is to be able to maintain cell signaling inside your body. So when your body needs repair and replacement of cells, you need to be able to signal. When you need the blood sugar to go up and down, you need to be able to signal. When any one or part or of any one of your body systems has need of a resource, it needs to signal. And it happens everywhere, all throughout your body, both electrically and chemically. These signaling processes are going on, and these are really what create the community of cells that allows life to take form in multicellular organisms, that allows life to exist. And so I hope you understand this part. I hope it's been interesting to you also. Now we're going to switch a little bit from our cellular communities inside of our body to signals that we send between people, and the signals that we send between each other, especially in this cellular health coaching process. We form a community also of people that can help people. When we need help, we can send signals. When we want to set a goal, when we want to have this, remember all of the processes of coaching, have empathy, to reveal greatness and power in each other, to add real value to each other, to become a personal health coach or cellular health coach to someone, to listen deeply and observe with the heart. This is all part of cellular signaling or community signaling to each other that will help us to become a more healthy and robust community of people. And this is exactly what we want to be able to do in our certification course. So remember, we said now we're going to talk a little bit about what assistant coaches do. And so just to preface it, we talked about this before. A coach can pick up to 20 of assistant coaches, and each assistant coach can have 10 students. And that's the way that we're able to keep the structure of the community and also the signaling lines together. So a student has a trouble, he goes to the assistant coach. The assistant coach can't solve it, goes to the coach, etc. And so that's how it goes.